Hi, everybody. We are back for another session at the AAEEBL Symposium. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Theresa Conefrey from Santa Clara University, and she talks about AI on our side in learning ePortfolios and introduces now this last block of the symposium where we take a closer look at AI. Of course, artificial intelligence had already been part of the conversation throughout the symposium, but now we have kind of a bit more of an accelerated track or kind of bulked a couple of one presentation and then the workshop from Megan and Elle into it, and then a conversation that rounds everything up before we finish with the symposium. And so now I'd like to hand over to Theresa, whom I've known for a number of years now because she is a member of the ABLE Digital Ethics Task Force. Over to
Yes, it's
you.
lovely to see so many familiar faces. And I'm going to try sharing my screen. I hope this will work. I'm Theresa Conefrey from Santa Clara University in the Bay Area, and I'm going to be talking about ePortfolios or AI as it impacts ePortfolios and hopefully how it can impact AI in a good way. And I want to show you first my presentation overview. And I'm talking about AI in learning ePortfolios and the paradox to introduce that. If we think of two students, Alice and Bob, Alice spends a lot of time, produces a lovely ePortfolio with About Me and homepage, lots of artifacts, navigation, everything is perfect. Bob does the same. Everything looks good. Two brilliant ePortfolios, both get A for their work. But the paradox is that although the product is the same, the students aren't. So I want to unravel that a little bit, talk about some dangers with ePortfolios, possible solutions, and then what we can do in the classroom. So thinking about this core tension, as I said, the products are the same, but the students aren't because Alice and Bob, although their ePortfolio products look the same, Alice did hers the old-fashioned way. She struggled to figure out which artifacts she should include, how she should put everything together, what worked best for the navigation. Whereas Bob took the easy way out. He was kind of busy, so he turned to AI and he submitted a lovely looking ePortfolio with just a cursory check that all the sections worked out reasonably well, looked like what they were supposed to. So I think that is the danger, that students could be using AI in their ePortfolio. And on first glance, the e-portfolios could look similar, but of course, e-portfolios are a high impact practice because of how much they help students think about their goals, develop as academics, as intellectuals, as human beings in general. And if you sidestep that process by using AI, you don't get those benefits. And that's what I want to talk about in this presentation, how to keep AI or keep e-portfolios as a high impact practice and make sure that the students are getting the benefit, all that they should be getting from an e-portfolio. So if we think then why students might use e-portfolios or use AI in their e-portfolios, and my experience, these are some of the issues. Generally, it has to do with overwhelm. So students feeling really, really busy, not keeping up with all the different parts of their e-portfolio, not figuring out the items that they want to curate, having a tough time with the About Me, not knowing what to do for their reflections. And obviously, we all think that our class is the most important, but students have other classes too, and some of them are working. So if they don't keep up with their e-portfolios, if they don't do the work step by step, they might have this last minute pressure to outsource their thinking. And that's what I see going on in my institution, and I'm guessing it might be similar in other places. And oops, okay, good. My slides are moving on this machine. Yeah, and so there's a real problem with that. And that's what I'm trying to show in this slide, the cognitive risk. I don't know if some of you read the recent MIT experiment where they had three groups of students. One wrote their essays using AI. The second group, they were able to look at Google, and a third group where it was brain only. And these students agreed to have electrodes on their brains, and they could see the brain activity. And not surprisingly, their brains were a lot more active in the brain only group, and less so in the AI group, and kind of in the middle with the Google. And then when I asked the students about their work, if they could remember, quote any sentences or remember how they put their work together, the issue was that the AI group didn't take much ownership. They couldn't remember. They didn't know exactly what was in their essay. Whereas the group that had struggled the old-fashioned way, they, of course, did take ownership. They were proud of what they had done, and they could remember it very well. So that's what I see as a big risk then, this cognitive atrophy, use it or lose it, like any kind of muscle, and this erosion of personal agency. So giving up your thinking, offloading it, going with what an AI thinks about your activities, thinks about your reflection, and not taking agency, not taking control yourself. And what I try and tell the students then, how I get them on board, or one of my tactics for getting them on board, is to talk about how if everybody does it, if everybody uses AI, we get this very homogeneous kind of writing. I'm sure you all know what it looks like when you see AI in discussion posts or whatever. It's very generic. We all know how it's balanced. We know that it's got a pithy last sentence. Um, Once you've read some AI, you get a general sense of what it sounds like, what it looks like. And that's what we want students to avoid, because if they keep their own voice, if they do their own thinking, then they'll have a competitive advantage. It's their work, their e-portfolio that's going to stand out from all the others where the students did just use AI or used it to a heavy degree and didn't use their own voice, didn't personalize their writing. So my goal then, I want to move students in the direction of the productive zone. Across my campus, there's a wide range of opinions, but from those who are still banning it to those who, I wouldn't say encourage it, but are let students use it whenever or however. Or I guess also there's another camp of faculty who just don't do many writing assignments anymore, but I don't think that's the solution either. My solution is to try and be very transparent, talk in the classroom about how students are using AI, have them hear each other's experience, and then sort of together come up with ways that are productive. And I think it's very important if we don't have these discussions, because some students figure out a lot, some don't. Some are very concerned. They're very almost afraid of using AI because they're concerned that they'll be accused of using it and get into all kinds of academic integrity issues. So my feeling is that we should have open discussions and make it something that's not forbidden, but talk about how we can use it productively, because I want this cognitive development. I want students to retain their voice. I want them to grow their brains, to get the university education, the liberal arts education that they want to have, and not shortchange themselves, not change their future. And so I have boundaries. I do have an AI policy. And like I say, we talk in the classroom. And as far as I'm concerned, for the e-portfolios, for their writing in general, they can use AI to spark ideas, maybe, to overcome creative blocks if they're really stuck trying to figure out where to start, or maybe if they're trying to find themes across their artifacts, or if they're trying to refine their voice. If they sometimes we have students brilliant, but English is not their first language, and they might be using AI to help them with their grammar, sentence structures, and so on. And I'm as far as I'm concerned, I'm okay with that. It's still they're using AI to help them refine their voice to make their writing more legible. But what I don't like is students submitting work as is, or just with minimal refinement, minimal editing. I still want them to do the critical thinking, the creative thinking, the problem solving, because it's only through struggle that they are going to develop their cognitive skills, develop their writing, figure out who they are, figure out how they want to represent themselves in their e-portfolio. So when to make it a little bit more concrete, thinking about the classroom then, definitely a big issue when you talk to students about creating an e-portfolio if they've never created one before. It can seem a little bit overwhelming. What are they going to include? What are they going to say about themselves? Which of their activities? What photos? How are they going to represent themselves? If they want to have a contact page, how are they going to do that? And so I think in this situation, then some of my students are helped by using AI to just get started, figure out some options of how they could do a layout. Again, I would want them to make the decisions. I want them to manage the technology, not have it manage them. So maybe suggest 4 or 5 possible layouts, and they decide among them. And then the same again if they're struggling with their homepage or their About Me. I would want them to come up with multiple options rather than simply going with the first one. Or sometimes in class, we will look at different versions, AI versions of a typical student's About Me page, and compare and contrast and have the students notice which is the AI version and how it's not really serving them. So exercises like that, but keeping everything very transparent. And so, as you can tell, I'm very much about supporting a student agency. So I want my students afterwards to be able to say what is in their e-portfolio, how they made the decisions they did about what to include, how they decided on the organization, how they decided to present themselves in the About Me page and what they wrote on their homepage. So it's very much preserving their authentic voice, and it is very much them who's deciding what goes where. And in that way, I see them maintaining or supporting their own agency. And as I mentioned, we're at our university. We're used to be mostly international students in our graduate programs, but we're seeing more international students in our undergraduate programs. And there I do see a role for using AI to help with grammatical errors or any kind of writing issues that non-native speakers might face that native speakers wouldn't. And so how do I encourage students to do more of their own work and less offloading on AI? I have a scaffolded approach. And instead of thinking about the product, so what they're supposed to do, I want to focus on how to do it, a process-based approach. And I do this by having several different check-in points throughout the quarter. Yeah, and I should back up a little bit and say that Santa Clara, we're still on quarter, so it's 10 weeks, and 10 weeks go by pretty quickly. But I try and break it up, maybe week 3, week 4, week 8, and then week 10 would be the times when I would have checkpoints or work that is due. And then more specifically, then, here are some of the ways that I break up these checkpoints. Initial notes, and we might do this on paper or on card or on whiteboard, so a little bit of visually representing how they want their e-portfolio to look like, what they might include. So just brainstorming on paper. And this is something that we do in classroom, and so I can see nobody is using AI for this part. And then rough drafts, I would be asking students to do rough drafts of their particular reflections, rough drafts of their homepage and their About Me. And they'll submit those to me and also to other students, and we'll do peer editing around that. And then maybe twice throughout the quarter, we'll have work in progress where students can volunteer to show how far they've got in their e-portfolio and to get feedback from other students. And I'll require them to submit their e-portfolios to me as well, so I can see that they are making progress and see if there's anything I need to discuss with the students. And very important that I can open all their artifacts. I don't know about the different platforms you're using, but we've always had the issue that sometimes students upload artifacts that we can't view because they haven't set the permissions correctly. So also a little check for that. And then we have our final check is week 9 because week 10, their work is due. So why does the process matter? As I was saying, there's accountability. I can see that the students are making progress and they know that they have deadlines. I know then that they're not going to be doing everything at the last moment. The student knows that they have the deadlines. The student knows what's due, and all of that is helping them make sure that they stay on target. And then because we're doing the peer review, or they're submitting work to me and I'm giving them feedback, we can have conversations about the intellectual labor. So if I do notice that a student is using AI a little bit too much, offloading too much of their thinking to an AI, I would have a conversation. And maybe some of the other students would notice that as well. And so that in that way, we can talk a little bit more explicitly about intellectual labor, about voice, and so on. So what is my ultimate goal? I want the ePortfolio to remain a high impact practice, even in the age of AI. I don't want it to be just an academic exercise. I want the students to be thinking how they've met their learning goals and how the learning goals for my class help them in their future trajectory. I'm all about intentional learning. So what is it that they're doing in my class? How is that a step towards where they want to go in the future? And I want to make sure that they are using AI. They will be using it in the workplace. AI is here to stay, but I want to make sure that they're controlling the technology, not having it control them. And so in conclusion, I want to keep the e-portfolios very much a human enterprise. And if students are using AI, I want it to enhance their work and not replace it. And I think in the case of e-portfolios, in the case of a lot of writing assignments, the way to do this is to focus on the process over the product. And of course, the process really is developing the student, not the product, not whatever it is, an e-portfolio or different kind of writing assignment. And in this way, we can maintain the cognitive advantage. We can help the students to develop their brain to make sure that it doesn't atrophy, and preserve their critical thinking, creative thinking, and their problem-solving activities. Thank you very much. I finished with enough time for some questions. And
Thank
I'm
you
going
so
to
much.
stop sharing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Theresa, for the quick run through of all the things that you have done with AI now over, I think it's probably about 4 years at minimum that you've started looking into that more closely, also as part of your work on the task force. And I really like the emphasis on not losing the human touch. And of course, in recent weeks, there has been more chatter around, yeah, students or current younger students losing metacognitive skills and not being able to process things as much. And so I would like to know if anybody has a question or comments. If they are longer ones, you're very welcome to keep them until after Megan and Elle's workshop, because we will have a full half hour of kind of wrapping up AI in a conversation as well. But if you have some quick things that you want to share, please do go ahead. Theresa, then question from my end. Do you have an AI tool built into the portfolio platform that you use
We
that
don't.
you encourage?
We don't. At the moment, students are using Google Sites, and we're Google Campus, and Gemini is built into Google.
Mm.
Or the students have access to Gemini, they have access to GEMS and Learning ePortfolio. Or what else do they have? Yeah, maybe some of them have. There are some accounts for Claude, but I think just Gemini is the main AI product, and I suppose privately they could be using ChatGPT.
Mm. Yeah.
So no, we don't have anything built into our AI platform, or sorry, our ePortfolio platform.
Theresa, do you
Mm.
find that students are interested in where in other students using AI, either to shame them or to figure out how it works or to understand it better? Do they speak openly, or
Oh
how
yeah,
does
yeah.
this play out in your class?
Yeah, I would say yeah, students do speak openly about it. Some are against, they're against AI. They feel that their generation is suffering. So I have those students, and then I have other students who are going into tech fields who are very pro AI. So I think the conversations are open. I guess, an issue, maybe not so much in my class, but across campus, are students talking about fairness. If they're, especially if they're in the science classes where everybody's being graded on a curve, I have heard discussions about, is it fair? Because maybe the students who are using AI get higher grades. I don't have any answers to that. In my field, it's not so much of an issue.
Mhm. Thank you.
Megan, you've been furiously sharing resources with us, which is awesome, and I'll make sure that we also include them in the sessions then as resources when we provide the summary and the recordings. Do you want to add anything through the microphone?
No, sorry for the folks who are watching the recording. As Theresa was going, I was trying to amplify her with like recent research and scholarship that absolutely supports everything she's saying or expands out in other ways. Something she had said made me think of Sonia's earlier presentation where she used a portfolio to process changing um, career and higher ed and thinking about how folio thinking can help us kind of regulate and navigate complex moments. And then here's AI coming in and psychologists think it's changing the way our brain can cope or organize content. And thus we are seeing dysregulation from students. So the wide ranging aspects is not just writing. You know, everyone's so focused on writing, but it impacts so many ways we consume and process information. You know, both positive and negatives. But I just was trying to kind of, as Theresa was going, I was like, that makes me think of this. That makes me think of this. Like these are very timely and the data is coming through in real time. So it's both exciting. Like I said, I'm gathering it like a squirrel and really trying to apply it to like I'm always joking about it, but not really like how do we keep that do no harm philosophy within education? I want my students to be digitally fluent, but I don't want to take away their ability to cope with a complex world emotionally. Or I was trying to find the one where students, is out of writing studies where students believe they are authors when they do prompting, but not much editing. But then they cannot remember their essay. I think Theresa pointed some of that cognitive offloading, but it's even this idea of what is an author is wildly negotiated right now. And so they don't understand this moral rhetoric. But then again, there are students who are very, very opposed because they feel their agency is being undermined all around them. So just fascinating. And I was trying to be a good wingman off in the chat.
Megan, thanks so much. And you have the MIT study in there as well. I was just clicking on your links.
Yeah, you're always an awesome wingman to have in any conversation and not just for the resources that you share in the chat. So once again, thank you so much, Theresa. Round of
Thank you.
applause for you. Um, and we certainly have more conversations around the topic of AI.